Well, folks, I'm still in Mississippi this week. The temperatures this past week, they've been outrageous. Now, my bride, she's been keeping me up to date with the weather at home, and has not been very different there either. It's about that time of the year where the grass in my yard will start turning brown and crunchy. Although down here we have had rain, and lots of it, but only in the evenings. Torrential downpours that only last a few minutes. It only seems to make the humidity at the end of the day even worse than it was throughout the day. This past week, we've had a sort of a celebration at one of the locations where I'm doing my coaching. One of the members of the rig crew was recognized by leadership across the organization, including globally, for his performance and contribution to building an excellent safety culture with his fellow team members. It was a great example of leadership using the power base of reward power or recognition power. I often coach the leaders on location about how that power base it's often underutilized. Even the smallest of recognition for good performance can go a very long way. When you reward or recognize, publicly recognize among their peers good behaviors, well, you get more of that. Not only from the individual being recognized, but from the peer group as well. Just like not saying anything about poor behavior reinforces poor behavior. Now, speaking of poor behavior or small minded behavior, we once again have some of that going on in this election season right here in House District 12. Some more of my campaign signs are missing or been damaged. I always say it's a good thing that signs cannot vote, if you know what I mean. I may not have the same number of signs as my main opponent, but the more he spends on them, the better, if you know what I mean. Those signs, they will not walk into a voting booth and vote for him or vote for me. Why spend money on them? However, I do have enough signs that if you would like one in your yard, just send an email and I will make arrangements to get you one. I also have a reserve number of them to place at voting locations on election day. There will be more also placed strategically around the district in the coming weeks as soon as I return home from my current coaching engagement right here in Mississippi. For now, though, let's get the disclaimer out of the way. The following content is approved by Larry Linton for TN12, candidate for the GOP nomination for Tennessee House of Representatives, District 12. Larry Linton, Treasurer. Now, let's get on with this week's episode of the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast, where I'll discuss what it means when you bring questions and concerns to leadership, be it at your work, an organization you're a member of, or to elected members of your government, what it means when they dodge and weave your questions. What do you think it means? So let's take a stand in the arena together again this week, folks, and get on with the show. Welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. On this show, we will discuss the assaults on our liberty by the very institution we the people created to secure our liberty. We will also compare and contrast the actions of people in leadership positions to the servant leadership that is needed to protect our God-given, constitutionally protected rights. Additionally, we will break down the many lies that elected and unelected officials in government and media spin every day in order to secure for themselves positions of power and influence that are antithetical to the system of government our founding fathers created and passed down to us. Your host on this program is Larry Linton, a 30-year veteran of the United States Navy who also runs his own leadership consulting company. He is also a candidate for the Republican Party's nomination to represent Tennessee's House District 12, which includes Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Pittman Center, Weirs Valley, Seymour, and parts of Sevierville, and most of Sevier County. So here is your host, Larry Linton. Once again, good morning, folks. Let's get into the question that I posed in the introduction segment of this week's episode. What do you think it means when leadership in any organization that you are a part of, what does it mean when those people that are in those leadership positions, they ignore your questions and concerns? Also, the way they ignore those same questions and concerns is something to be considered as well. Do they just brush them off and never address them directly? Or do they, like the national mainstream media and government spokespeople that are paid by your tax dollars, try and spin those very same questions into a lie, trying to convince you that what you see, read, or hear is not actually what you see, read, or hear? Like the recent spin the commies and their enablers and sycophants are telling us that we are all victims of something they are calling cheap fakes at the national level, or how choice lanes are not really toll roads here at the state level. Or how about the spin that giving Ford Motor Company a huge sum of taxpayer money, initially nearly $1 billion, but has grown to more than that now, how giving a multi-billion-dollar company taxpayer money, how it will be good for the state of Tennessee, only to see that same auto manufacturer scale back electric vehicle operations at the plant our state government saw fit to gamble the citizens' money on. Another spin our governments have used includes school voucher schemes being sold as education freedom, not only here in the state of Tennessee, but all across the nation. Or how about when you are informed to call somebody back at a certain time, at a certain day, and your call always gets sent to voicemail? This is only after the person who answered the call initially informs you, hey, I got your cell phone number here on the caller ID, and will inform the person you are trying to contact that you had called. We'll get into that specific instance in the next segment. But continuing on, maybe it's like a candidate running for office will tell you, quote unquote, I'll champion policies that empower our entrepreneurs and small businesses to thrive. Yet, this person will have voted to impose fees on the smallest of businesses here in Sevier County, the local residents who rent out a tiny house or a cabin to generate income for themselves and their families. This individual, this candidate, will also serve in a government position that is very unresponsive to any questions that surround the makeup of and the accounting practices of a brand new level of government bureaucracy created to take the residents' money in the form of fees. Or how about when that same candidate for state office informs voters that, quote, quality education is necessary for the success of our children? I'll push for initiatives that improve our education system and prepare students for the future, unquote. What he doesn't inform voters about is that he was in a position to do that for more than 20 years, and yet he and his comrades on the county commission sat idly by while the county's Board of Education, mind you, the county commission can impact the Board of Education's budget. Each of the county commissioners all sat idly by while the Sevier County Board of Education purchased the sexualizing, corrosive, and divisive curriculums that are at the heart of the mental illness plague of government schools all across the nation. Well, I guess that answers the question of whether or not that candidate will push for initiatives that improve the government-controlled education system, don't you think? What future exactly did he help the students in Sevier County schools prepare for? One in which they are taught to hate this country's founding? One where there is any number of systems of oppression built into the very fabric of society, and that if the students fail in life, it was because of either their skin color or their genitalia didn't match what they were taught to believe? Just why won't this county commissioner running for the state legislature accept invitations to answer these questions in a public forum alongside the other two candidates running for the same position? The answer to that question lies in the title of this week's show. It is leadership, dodging and weaving away from any situation or circumstance where they would have to answer these questions. Much like the same county commissioner on his campaign social media pages stated, quote, fiscal responsibility is a must. I'll fight against wasteful spending, ensuring that taxpayer dollars are used widely to address, or not widely, wisely to address the needs of our community, unquote. Needs of the community, right? Just which communities' needs have been addressed here in Sevier County? The residents that have to deal with the terrible roads and even worse traffic conditions, despite the county bringing in $371 million in revenue for fiscal year 2023. The expenditures for that year came out to be about $307 million. Do you think we could solve a lot of our water and infrastructure woes with the $64 million of surplus? Do you think the county could have funded their short-term rental safety inspection program without resorting to attaching fees that disproportionately affect the residents versus the out-of-state owners of those same short-term rental properties? Of course they could. So, just where is the fiscal responsibility in this situation? Or is it the same fiscal responsibility that is exercised by the communist and establishment Republicans? You all know the answer to that. In an era where the cost of living is on the express elevator to the top, our county commission is thinking of ways of squeezing more money out of the residents, all the while not improving the terrible infrastructure conditions in this county that have been accumulating for decades. Decades, by the way, in which a certain candidate has been sitting on the county commission and is now asking for your vote to send him to Nashville to work in the General Assembly and do the very same things to the entire state. Do you really want to know what is some of the budget spent on? Well, $228 million on some of that quality education we mentioned earlier, as compared to $15 million for the roads. If you want to know the measure of a man, or men in this case, find out where they spend most of their time, energy, and money on. This situation is a bit different because they are spending the taxpayers' money. The county commission is more interested in allowing the sexualizing, corrosive, and divisive curriculum to be pumped into our schools instead of the infrastructure that would be more beneficial to the residents. Now, there are some that would argue that it is the Sevier County Board of Education that is making these purchases. And that's completely true. But the county commission directly impacts the budget of the Board of Education. They control some of the purse strings, which would give them great sway over the decisions of the board. Yet, what have they done with their ability to affect the board's decision on curriculum purchases? They sat idly by, despite knowing the concerns parents in Sevier County have had with those very same purchases. Maybe the other candidate for state representative believes it is pushing for initiatives to improve our education system here. The problem is, those are initiatives that the National Education Association and other communist style unions say will improve the education system in our country, state, and nation. Will this candidate participate in a public forum along with the other two candidates to defend his position on that, though? Of course not. He dodges and he weaves his way around taking public responsibility for his actions on the county commission for 20 plus years now, hoping that name recognition and the behind the scenes push, oh, and don't forget cheating by the rest of the establishment good old boys, that will get him across the finish line in the upcoming August primary. Another one of his statements is a classic one used by many members of the establishment. It is this, quote, "Government transparency is vital. I'll work towards open and accountable governance, ensuring that your voice is heard in the decision-making process," unquote. Now, if you are like me and have submitted an open records request for any number of items, you would find out just how transparent the government is. We discussed this a bit in last week's episode. The processes put into place by government make it extremely hard for the citizens to seek and obtain transparency. Often it comes with an added expense. Just how transparent is a government that charges its citizens to get copies of official records created by that same government? During my scraps with the Board of Education, I had submitted an open records request wanting to review all the communications regarding the purchases of certain curricula and communications with a company that had purchase agreements with the Sevier County Board of Education. After they had gathered the information, they wanted to charge me a large sum of money just to get copies of the records responsive to my request. Or they said I could take a few hours out of my day to drive down to their building. That means I would have to suffer through the terrible traffic problems so that those traffic problems we can lay right at the feet of our local government, by the way. And upon arriving, review the documents. Well, that's what I did, of course. That is just one of the myriad ways our government ensures that conducting oversight of their activities costs the citizens either time or money. The establishment Republicans, which is the same thing as the good old boys here in Sevier County, along with the communists in government, both elected and employed ones, they do not want any type of transparency. They'll give lip service to it. They'll make social media posts about it, but they won't do anything about it. I fall back again to the point of this week's show, and that is the point that my main opponent in the House District 12 GOP primary refused or outright ignored more than 40 invitations to come out to public forums to discuss these issues with voters face to face. It was an opportunity for him to provide some backup to the generalities and platitudes he serves up on his social media pages. Wow. Seems that I'm up against a break right here, but we'll be right back, so don't go anywhere. All right, folks, we're back. Everything that I said in the previous segment was just a reminder to not fall for the platitudes and generalities of political candidates, as we've discussed on the show many times before. The platitudes and generalities are just another way the establishment candidates will dodge and weave away from any serious questions that voters may ask them. Sometimes these platitudes and generalities become a form of dogma to the political class. You know, one of the profiles that I follow on X is called Thomas Sowell Quotes. Mr. Sowell is a brilliant human being, and there are many things he has stated in the past that should be required reading in government schools, but they won't do that. Anyway, this post, as it relates to dogma, he had this to say, quote, "The scariest thing about politics today is not any particular policy or leaders, but the utter gullibility with which the public accepts notions for which there is not a speck of evidence, such as the benefits of diversity, the dangers of overpopulation, and innumerable other fashionable dogmas," unquote. You will always get something in a similar vein from nearly every individual in the establishment or in the good old boy network. Phrases such as genuine desire to help people. And this will come after applauding Ronald Reagan's famous phrase about the most dangerous words in the English language are, quote, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Or stating that I'll be a strong advocate for policies that foster growth, job creation, and prosperity right here in District 12, unquote, after his 20 plus years of service on the county commission has given us an example of what unrestrained and unplanned for growth will do to a community, all to line the pockets of certain people, but to the detriment of the community. The dogma of I'll do different and better than my 20 plus year record should be all the information the people in this district need to make the correct choice in this upcoming primary. And since there are 3 candidates running, the only choice is anybody but the establishment good old boy candidate. The establishment candidate is often a person that will be considered the quote unquote polite candidate. That is often because they only use those words or phrases that are the platitudes and generalities that do not accurately portray the person themselves. Now, that brings to mind a short video clip that I watched the other day. It was put together by an organization called the Foundation for Economic Education, or FEE. I'm a subscriber to the newsletter that is often filled with some great material that everybody should read. Anyway, in a recent newsletter, I saw they had mentioned something about why everybody should learn that politeness shouldn't be our primary way of evaluating politicians, but far too often it is. The Republican Party, or more appropriately, the establishment wing of the Republican Party, has generally put up the polite candidate on the national stage, as well as the state and local stages, in the hopes of enticing voters to side with the quote unquote nice person. Well, let me ask you this. How's that worked out for us so far? On the national level, we got George W. Bush with his compassionate conservatism. Don't get me wrong, he was the lesser of 2 evils as compared to green energy rules for thee and not for me, Al Gore. But W's government spending and expansion of government control was anything but conservative. Then we got Mitt Romney as a candidate to run up against the commie messiah, Barack Obama. Oh, and in between, we had the self-styled maverick, John McCain. Both of those candidates were disasters. Both of them were not conservative in the least. Now, Donald J. Trump, he was and is the complete opposite of the polite candidate. He actually fought hard against the commies instead of working to compromise, which in the end always erodes the people's liberty. President Trump was wrong on a few things, mainly because he surrounded himself with people that did not have the country's best interests at heart, especially when it came to the scamdemic. But he was definitely not the polite candidate. Here in Tennessee, we ended up with Bill Lee, a polite guy, but who governs mostly like a commie would govern. Here at the local level, we have, well, you know what we have, a candidate that has refused to publicly debate and fills his social media posts with polite platitudes and generalities. Anyway, I checked out the video. Not only is it funny, it is spot on. It's the truth. That is why I would like to share it with you all. I want to give credit where credit is due, though. This short clip, it was put together by the Foundation for Economic Education. If you would like to find out more about them, be sure to sign up for their newsletter and check out their social media links. I will include that in the description of this week's show on Spotify, Rumble, and YouTube. With that being said, give the short 2-minute or so clip a watch. I'll come back on the other side and we'll talk more about the way the state Republican Party has been dodging and weaving me for the past week. So here's the video.
Those who are supposed to defend the values of the West are co-opted by a vision of the world that inexorably leads to socialism and therefore poverty. I say out with these libs! De fuera!
Man, that Mexican guy sure is making a lot of sense.
You can't call him Mexican. He's from Argentina. That's racist.
Oh, couldn't tell you where he's from. I just thought what he's saying was smart.
You can't just stereotype people. Besides, that guy is so rude. Listen to this guy. He's way more respectful.
Contrary to what the gentleman from Argentina said,
See? Gentleman. That's a nice word.
people of color, our friends in the LGBTQIAP2+ community, birthing people and children, the global poor, dog moms or dog birthing persons,
Very respectful.
have suffered from centuries of repression under capitalism.
What? Capitalism? In South America? When?
Now that some are voting for people like that man over there, we must save them from their own poor choices. I urge you all to support a global revolution that puts us in charge.
He was very polite.
Wow, what a measured way of saying that he and his elitist friends at the WEF should have the power to control what poor third world people get to do. And he's calling them dumb for electing a guy who isn't a socialist. Even though South America has had almost nothing but socialist governments for a century. You don't find that a little patronizing?
Yeah, okay, a little bit.
People often confuse the difference between the right words, being polite, and saying the right things, and actually promoting good ideas. This guy might be speaking in a way that sounds nice, but what he's saying isn't actually nice at all. He's up there talking about controlling millions of other people's lives, stripping away their freedom, and overriding their own sovereign choice as voters because he sees them as inferior. Lacing his statements with trendy buzzwords and pseudo-sensitive terminology doesn't make the core of what he's saying any less contemptuous. Or contemptible. I know I could probably learn to speak better, but this is like watching a wolf put on a fluffy bunny costume and the audience not being able to tell the difference.
Yeah, okay, I guess I was really listening to how he was talking instead of focusing on what his words really meant. It's too bad so many people with bad ideas can sound so sweet.
You don't think we need to print more money? Let's see who wins a boxing match, you fat idiot. Where am I? Well, not all of them.
Well, what do you think, folks? Pretty spot on, right? I have often been accused of not being polite when answering questions or responding to posts on social media. Well, I always operate from this position. Extremism in the defense of liberty is a virtue. If that were not the case, we wouldn't be living in the constitutional republic that is the United States of America. Now, would we? If the founding fathers were all polite men, our nation would probably still be trying to negotiate better protections of our freedoms from the King of England. Plus, I find it invigorating to destroy the arguments of the communists and their enablers, along with the establishment good old boys and their supporters. For now, though, let's talk about the leadership of the state Republican Party, specifically Scott Golden. He's a show favorite, isn't he? In last week's show, I mentioned that I spoke with a person who answered their phone lines, and this person informed me that state GOP leadership was busy preparing for their annual statesman's dinner up in Nashville, and they wouldn't be able to speak with me, but that I should call back the following week. So I waited until Monday and started calling again. On Monday, the person who answered the phone informed me that Mr. Golden wouldn't be available till around 11 Central Time the next day, which was Tuesday, and that I should try calling back then, which I did. Can you guess what happened? Well, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at around 11 p.m. or 11 a.m. each day, my call was always sent to voicemail. It's kind of strange, not really. Then when I tried to call back at the time I was told to call back, that it went straight to voicemail. Remember, though, I informed you that the person who answered my call told me they could see my name and number on their caller ID and would let Mr. Golden know that I had tried to call him. That is one way that a person in leadership positions will handle things when they are called out for a shortcoming. They will dodge and weave to try and escape answering any questions about how they are conducting themselves, either unethically or immorally. Much like the quote unquote polite establishment candidate will not take any public questions by dodging and weaving, state GOP leadership is dodging and weaving, having to answer for what can only be corrupt or unethical behavior. Don't worry, though. I'll keep trying to call him back. Heck, there might even be a drive up to Nashville in my future after I get back from this trip. Let's see how comfortable he will be when confronted face to face. Let's see if he could dodge and weave then. I'll let you all know if and when that happens, though. Maybe even catch some video of it. Now, that would be hilarious, don't you think? Now, following a short break, we will close out this week's show with wisdom from God's Word and my closing thoughts. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back with a conclusion. Before we close, folks, I want to thank you once again to not only the regular loyal listeners or followers of the show, but to the new audience members as well that have joined the program since this campaign season started. If you live in House District 12, you may have received a campaign mailer this week. Be sure and check out the website listed there. For the residents of Sevier County, you may have received your quarterly Hometown Sevier magazine. In it, you will also see a campaign advertisement. Be sure and use them both to spread the word here in Sevier County that we do not have to put up with a good old boy establishment anymore. That there is a true constitutional Republican in this race to represent the residents of Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Weirs Valley, Pittman Center, Seymour, and parts of Sevierville, just really most of Sevier County. It is time to send those good old boys a message that they don't control things as much as they think they do. And as I mentioned earlier, my signs will start going up in earnest over the next few weeks leading up to the primary. If you would like to volunteer and want more information, send me an email. The address is larry-for-tn12 at protonmail.com. Again, that is larry-for-tn12 at protonmail.com. Now, this week's wisdom from God's Word comes to us from Proverbs 24, verses 1 and 2. Do not envy the wicked. Do not desire their company, for their hearts plot violence and their lips talk about making trouble. You know, it isn't only the communists and their enablers that are the wicked trying to rob us of our sweat equity and take away our liberty. The establishment good old boys are doing it as well. The violence their hearts plot is to keep us all in debt bondage and skyrocket the cost of living for normal, everyday Tennesseans. Their polite lips make trouble by lying to us with their platitudes and generalities. We need to send them a message. No more. We can do that at the ballot box. Early voting starts on the 12th of July here in Tennessee, folks. Time is running out for you to verify that you are registered to vote. Ensure that you are so that you can vote. I would ask that you follow the advice of one of the main voices in conservative movement right now, Dan Bongino, for this election season. It's called the 10-10-10 rule. Bring 10 people to the polls, email 10 people about the days for voting, text 10 people and ask them to ensure they have a plan to vote. I'm asking for the voters here in House District 12 to take a stand in the arena with me this primary election. Our government, big or small or local, state or national, it needs to be put back in its constitutionally limited box. And we need to ensure that we only elect candidates that will work to secure the liberty of the people. Sometimes those candidates are not polite. Until next week, Reveille, it's time to wake up.